It takes faith overcoming life worries. And I want to start with this simple question. What does faith is? In answering the question, most people say that faith is belief. But the word faith is applied in different contexts. For instance, a religion is called faith. Then followers of a religion are called brothers in faith. The book of Acts made reference to those who were obedient to the faith. The apostle exhorted the disciples to remain true to the faith. And it is also said that faith is fruit and a gift of the Holy Spirit. We may find it somewhat confusing to assimilate the concept of faith. But let's try to understand it using the Bible. Jesus called his disciples to have faith in God. Literally, have a faith of God. But how is that faith of God? We see that all creation is the result of what God says to happen. God had no doubt or hesitation when he said, "Let be light," or "Let the earth bring forth grass," and it was. The reason for that trust is justified in the awareness God has of the creative power, which results from his omnipotence. Think this another way. If you have plenty of money, it is said that you have purchasing power. Then if you enter a store or supermarket, after selecting what you want, you confidently go to the cashier simply because you know you have purchasing power. God is aware of his power and authority over the material and the spiritual domain. Jesus spoke about having faith as small as a mustard seed. Whoever has this quality of faith believes the word of God and act on the basis of his promises and authority, the word. To Jesus, faith is not a question of quantity but of quality. It is the kind of belief that meets God's expectations. You know, every year, large tracts of forest burned in California. And just as a small spark is needed to ignite thousands of acres. And the reason is that a spark generates the same reactions when in contact with flammable materials, such as the one generated by the sun, but on a smaller scale. So it is with faith. In John 14 verse 10 says, "The word Jesus said to you, I do not say it on my own initiative or authority, but the Father abiding continually in me. He does his work." On one occasion, the disciple has to face a situation with a demon possessed, and they couldn't cast out the demon. Jesus intervened, and the young man was set free. Then Jesus rebuked them for their unbelief, although he had given them authority to cast out demons. So it was a matter of having faith as a mustard seed. Another time, in the presence of the apostle, Jesus cursed a fig tree, and apparently nothing happened in that moment. The next day, they passed by, and Peter, who reportedly has been in doubt, realized that the fig tree was dry to the roots. And he called Jesus' attention about it. Mark 11:20-22 refers, "In the morning as they went along, they saw the fig tree withered from the roots. And Peter remembered and said to Jesus, 'Rabbi, look, the fig tree you cursed has withered.' 'Have faith in God,' Jesus answered." According to most interpreters, as I mentioned before, what Jesus actually told them was, "Had faith with God." This is a sort of faith that moves mountains. Now, there is a close connection between the kind of faith that Jesus speaks about and prayer. In his commentary on the Gospel of Mark, in reviewing this passage, Stroffer says, "What to distinguish this faith from the enthusiasm that is beyond the reach of one's power and what makes a man and his work end in a fiasco. The faith of Mark 11:23 and following. It is a faith that prays. Prayer is the source of his power and the flow of his strength. The omnipotence of God is his only security, and the sovereignty of God his only restraint. Faith enables the one who prays to believe despite as adverse the circumstances. It is a living faith, says Matthew Henry, a faith so strong that it takes for granted what it asks for. Faith makes it possible for a human being to walk on water, as happened with Peter. But he walked based on the word of Jesus. True faith rests in the revelation of the mind and the will of God, no mere intuition or natural deductions. The classic biblical passage about faith is Hebrews 11:1. Let's read the passage from different versions. For instance, from the American Standard Version, it says, "Now faith is assurance of things hoped for, a conviction of things not seen." The King James translates, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." And the New International Version says, "Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see." In those translations stand out the following nouns: assurance, conviction, substance, evidence, and confidence. And all translations agree that faith is something that is expected, although it is not seen. The entire 11th chapter of Hebrews is devoted to emphasize the great victories achieved through faith in circumstances which mostly were hoping against hope. But let me try to illustrate faith with some simple examples. Suppose one of my children wants a smartphone and asks me to buy one for him. After knowing what he wants, I make this promise: when I receive my next check, I will give you the money. When he receives the promise, he will be able to offer to his friends, "I already have my telephone. My father promised me that he will buy it for me." My son will take it for granted based on my words. That is, in the promise I made to him. And it is true that in material terms, he does not yet have the smartphone to use it. But by trusting in my word, he can touch, as an act of faith, a near reality, as if it were a fact. And what generates this kind of faith is the authority or reliability of the one in whom the faith has been deposited. In our case, God, with all his attributes and based on his promises. Whoever has faith in God does not rely on what his senses can perceive or fully understand, otherwise it is no faith. Paul warns in Romans 8:24 that hope that it seems is not hope at all. Who hopes for what they already have, he says. It is a fact that God honors a well-founded faith. Often God glorifies himself through circumstances that will discourage the most optimistic. Let's see a couple of cases. When the three slaves companions of Prophet Daniel, known as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, has to face the wrath and threats of the king, only the steadfast faith kept them firm. The king said to them, "If you do not worship me, I will command you to throw you into a furnace of burning fire. And what God is the one who will deliver you out of my hand?" The response of those young men increased the king's wrath. They said, "The God whom we serve can deliver us from the furnace of fires and from your hand, O king." And so it was because God honored their faith. Another example was Jericho. By the time of Joshua, it was a city that for centuries has remained firm before many failed attempts to conquer it. Jericho dominated the lower valley of the Jordan River. And for the Hebrews, the conquest of the city was required if they want to advance into the promised land. What has guarded the city were the two impressive walls that surrounded it. Those were the walls of discouragement. And it was no for less, considering its dimensions. Archaeology has discovered that the outer wall has a thickness of about 6 feet. And the outer wall inside was 12 feet wide and almost 30 feet high. One must be mad or have an extraordinary faith to believe that such wall would collapse only while walking around them. But God decided to build in Jericho a perpetual monument of honor to their faith. It was necessary to believe God to do what He commanded, to walk around the city in silence during the first 6 days, and on the 7th day the city was to be surrounded 7 times. And on the last round, the priest was to blow the trumpet, and the people to shout, and the wall of the city shall fall, Joshua said. Can you imagine how ridiculous it would be in the eyes of residents of Jericho for the action of the children of Israel? But faith, as we have pointed out, is advancing along paths that do not pass through the majority. The result of this act has been well recognized by history. The walls of Jericho collapsed suddenly, and the city was conquered with faith as a weapon. Faith enables us to wait firmly for divine intervention. Belief is important, but we also have to act based on what we believe. The reason why Abraham was declared the father's faith is because he believed what God told him. Faith is not just having a strong desire for something to happen. It is the first conviction that God will do what He promised and what we ask. But if we ask according to His will, Romans 4:18 said that against all hope, Abraham in hope believed. And the Bible is full of testimonies of people who operate in faith. By faith, Elijah announced that it would not rain, but by his word, and challenged the prophets of Baal. By faith, Noah prepared the ark. By faith, Abraham led his family and country to go out for the promised land. By faith, David confronted Goliath in an act of faith. By faith, the servant of a centurion of Capernaum was healed. But by faith, a woman who has been subject to bleeding for 12 years was healed. By faith, 10 lepers were healed when they obeyed the word of Jesus. Jesus stated, "Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours." What did Jesus mean by whatever? Bible says in James 4:2-3, "You do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask wrongly to expend on your passions." And 1 John 5:14 gives more clarity. This is the confidence we have in approaching God. That is, we ask anything according to His will, He hears us. The opposite of faith is doubt, and doubt makes us to see mountains or walls as something impossible to overthrow. Hebrews 11:6 states, "And without faith it's impossible to praise God, because anyone who comes to Him must believe that He exists and that He rewards those who earnestly seek Him." But Jesus says in Matthew 19:20 that with God all things are possible. Faith brings to action the unsuspected resources of God and put them at the service of His people on earth. Whatever it is, the resource will come. God will be glorified and He will save His people. The size of faith doesn't matter because God is the one who is moving the mulberry tree or the mountain. Faith helps to stand firm until the miracle and salvation from God comes. Even if the granting our petitions implies God's doing what is really extraordinary, He will do it in answer to the prayer of His faithful people. In summary then, when Jesus says in Mark 11:24, whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours, we understand whatever to mean whatever according to God's will. And we understand that undoubting faith is only possible when God reveals what He will do in response to anyone who believes Him. Faith basically take God at His word and trust in Him for salvation. In the past, God never disappointed those who believe in Him, nor will He disappoint those who believe in Him today as you believe. Be one of them today. Believe. Believe in God, and your faith, based on His word, will be rewarded. God bless you.